Well, the Christmas season is here, and for myself, my wife Kim, our two girls, we absolutely love the Christmas season. And over the years, we have just added so many fun and festive Christmas traditions to this Christmas season. One of those is decorating for Christmas. And let's just be real honest, we kind of have a love-hate relationship with Christmas decorating. I mean, we love it when it's done, but getting all the boxes out and setting everything up, that's a little bit of a chore. But what I've discovered over the years is there's really two groups of people when it comes to, the timing of Christmas decorating. Some of you are in kind of group one. How many of you, show your hands, raise your hands, be excited. How many of you love to decorate for Christmas before Thanksgiving? Come on, that's for Kim and I. We love decorating way before Thanksgiving. In fact, Kim would decorate the day after Halloween if I would say okay. But we kind of have to come to an agreement. Somewhere in early November, we will decorate. Now, how many of you think that Thanksgiving should have its own day and you refuse to decorate until after Thanksgiving, after the bird gets the spotlight of a day? How many of you are after Thanksgiving decorators? That's okay, I get that. A few of you, though, wait until the week of Christmas. I've never understood that because it's way too much work for just 1 week. Well, another one of our Christmas traditions is, baking sugar cookies and decorating them. And I think we would always eat more cookie dough than actually the finished product, but we would always love to do that. And over the years, as our girls got older, the creativity just continued to increase. And we always would leave cookies for Santa Claus. Even to this day, our girls are 16 and 20. We still will leave cookies for Santa Claus. And yep, they do get eaten. But one of the epic moments of our Christmas celebration is our annual gingerbread house building contest. All of us are pretty competitive individuals, and so we start in, and there's some rules, and one of the rules is you have to move your completed gingerbread house from the table to the spot, the place where we're going to take the pictures. And no matter what happens when you transport your house, you can't fix it, right? That's just part of the challenge. And then we open it up to, social media, Facebook and Instagram, and allow everyone to vote. Last year, 2021's Christmas, this house that just maybe my wife built had a little bit of issue with its roof as she transported it to the small little table, and it didn't win. But this was the winner from last year. And I have to say, you want to know who the winner is? Who built this amazing, well-lit, well-executed gingerbread house? You want to know who? This guy right here. And I tell you, I got some boos in my house when I came out the winner, and they thought that maybe I rigged the system, but I didn't. It was fair voting on social media. Well, another one of our favorite Christmas traditions has been around, an Advent calendar. Now, early on, when our girls were really young, we had one of these felt Christmas trees, and they had felt ornaments, and you would put them onto the Christmas tree, and then that went from felt to a little wooden one with little doors and boxes. And then, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago, we got one of these, and we loved this because, when we bought it, we bought it at Starbucks, and they had candy in it, but we dumped all the candy out, and we actually printed off little sheets of paper with, different Bible verses in them, and then we would have different fun family activities throughout, all the 24 days leading up to Christmas. And every year, one of our girls would get the even days, one of our girls would get the odd days, and we just make our way through. And there was, for us, it's always been about keeping the focus on Jesus, what this entire season is about. You see, the Christmas season will come and go, and if we're not intentional, we'll just miss the significance, the power, the remembrance of what Advent is all about. This Christmas season, our team has worked hard, and we've developed what we're just simply calling the 12 gifts of Christmas. And the very first gift that we want to give to you, and there's 12 gifts that will span all of December. The first gift is, an Advent guide, and it's developed for kids. So parents, grandparents, make sure you grab it, but it's a simple guide that you personally can grab, and the verses will help guide you through, this Advent season. You see, Advent, this word simply means coming or arrival. It's a season where we reflect on God's promises, that God is who he says he is and will do everything he says he's going to do. It's a season of where we reflect about that God is present God. God is with us, God, that God will never leave us, God. Advent is a season where we get to reflect on the peace that comes from God's promises and his presence, no matter how chaotic our world might be, and it is, that we can experience his peace because of his presence and his promises. That Advent is a season where we reflect on, praising God for who he is. That Advent is a season where we reflect on how patient God is. Patient. Are you patient? I'm not. And I feel like we're living in a world that will actually celebrate people being patient. The week before Thanksgiving, I was out and had a long list to go shopping for as we prepare for Thanksgiving dinner. And I had a few other items that I also had to pick up. And the stores were just absolutely crazy busy. And I found myself looking for pecan wood because I was going to smoke a turkey, and I really wanted pecan wood. And so I went into a store to try to find it, and I couldn't find it. So I settled on, what I had, apple and hickory wood. But as I was there, another item on my to-do list was to get fuel stabilizer for my motorcycle. I have to winterize it. And so I thought that the store might have it. I walked over and I saw the price, and then my next thought was, I wonder if I can find it cheaper. And so I pulled out my phone, I opened up my Walmart app, and I realized I could save $4 if I ordered it from Walmart. And the next thought I had is I could have it delivered, so I didn't have to even face the busyness of the store. And so as I walked out of this other store, I was hitting order on my phone. And by the next day at noon, I had it sitting on my doorstep. You see, we're living in a day and time where we don't have to be patient, do we? And Advent is a season where we reflect on how patient God truly is. You see, let's not relegate Advent to just December. You see, Advent started thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Started with Adam and Eve. And so many times when we talk about the Adam and Eve story, we focus on their decision, their choice, sin, to eat something that God had told them not to. And that's an important part of Advent. Let's not miss that. But so many times we miss the fact that God was walking with Adam and Eve in the garden. God was personally present with them. As we make our way through the storyline in the Bible, we can't miss Abraham. When God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, and in fact, that came true. Why? Because God's promises always come true. And from Abraham, his sons became the 12 tribes. And over the course of time, those 12 tribes grew into mighty groups of people. And they found themselves in captivity in Egypt. And God heard the cries of his people. And so God sent Moses in to lead his people, these 12 tribes, out of Egypt. And Moses did that. I mean, God was providing the way and making the way, but it was Moses on the ground leading his people. And God reminded his people that he was their God. And Moses handed the baton of leadership to Joshua, who led God's people that had become this nation of Israel into the promised land, the land that God had said, hey, it's going to be yours, and it's going to be great land. And guess what? All other surrounding nations are going to look at you. Why? Not because of the land, but because of who I am in your life. And over again, God says, I will be your God. Personal, patient, present God. God whose promises will always happen. And God established with his people a covenant. This ancient word that means to bond or to come together, a covenant relationship. And God says, hey, this is what I'm going to bring to the table. This is what I'm going to bring to the relationship. This is what you can count on me for. And then God's like, but this is what I'm going to ask from you. You see, a covenant relationships is two groups or more coming together to say, hey, we are committing together that the relationship is that important. And God said, this is what I'm asking of you. And this is what I'm going to be for you. And as they settled in this land, amazing land, God knew that he needed to raise up some leaders to help lead. Again, God was very clear that he was going to be their ruler, their king, their leader, but he knew on the ground he needed someone like Moses, like Joshua. And so he raised up what the Bible calls judges. And in fact, we have a whole book of the Bible named Judges, these stories about men and women judges that led God's people. Then all of a sudden, a judge named Samuel rose up. Now, every judge understood that God was the ultimate judge. It was Jephthah that says, God the judge. It was Gideon who said, God is ruler. See, every judge fully realized their position, that God was telling them what to do, and that they were subservient to God, that God was the judge, was the ruler. And so when Samuel stepped on the scene, he fully understood his role to follow God's lead, to lead this nation, 12 tribes that became Israel. And the part of the story we're going to look at with Samuel is, well, he's coming towards the end of his leadership tenure. You can find it in the book of 1 Samuel, a book that's named after him. And this is where we're going to jump in. They, meaning a group of leaders, of elders within Israel, they said to him, Samuel, you are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now, right away, there's a tension element that goes redline for Samuel, because they're coming after Samuel. They're attacking Samuel. They're pointing out his age, saying, hey, you're just too old to lead now. You're too old to be effective. You're too old to be any good. And what's comical about this is, well, God comes to Abraham and Sarah late in their lives and said, hey, I'm going to do something great in you. And now they're looking at Samuel like, you're too old. And oh, by the way, Samuel, you have failed as a father. Now, both of those, there's elements of truth in there. But what God is going to do is a pretty powerful leadership insight, leadership principle that we can't miss. There's a classic leadership kind of word image, word picture, and maybe you're familiar with this, maybe not. If not, this is powerful. And it all gets attached to, well, an iceberg. Scientists tell us in an iceberg that you can only see about 10% that's above the water line. The other 90 or so percent is below the water line. It's what makes icebergs so difficult. And this is where the leadership principle comes from. And God's going to point this out to Samuel. So many times in the leadership circles, as we're leading people, and if you lead people, you'll get this, that we focus on the surface issue, what they're saying, what's happening above the water line, and we fail to look below. But below is where the real issues are. Below is where the real danger is. Below is what's really happening. And what God's going to point out is like, hey, Samuel, you're focusing on these two surface level, but there's something so much greater, something so much bigger, something so much deeper below the water line. And we do this in our daily lives. We just do this naturally. Now, think with me for a moment. You pull into a busy parking lot and someone cuts you off and pulls in. The above the waterline reaction is you can't believe that they would cut you off. You can't believe that they would pull right in front of you into the spot you were waiting for. Right? That's above. But if we actually would pause for a moment and start to think, what's below that? Yeah, just maybe they're just rude. Maybe that's true. Or maybe their child's sick. Their prescription is finally done, and they're rushing in to get it because, well, they're so concerned about their child or an aging parent. You see, if we actually pause for a moment and not just focus on the above and actually start looking below, that maybe what we see below the waterline is a much different picture than what we see on the surface. This happens in work all the time. You have an employee snap at you, your boss snaps at you. We focus above the waterline. But maybe if we just pause long enough and look below, just maybe something's going on in their life that we don't even know about. Maybe there's a stress going on that we don't know about. Maybe there's a relational tension that we don't know about. Maybe they're navigating a family situation that we don't even know about. And what God's going to do with Samuel is say, hey, Samuel, you can be frustrated. You can be upset. You can focus on what they're saying to you, but that's above the waterline. There's something much bigger, much deeper, much darker happening below the waterline. The people said, hey, Samuel, now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. And this is a glimpse into what's happening below the waterline. But we're told in verse 6 that when they said this, to give a king to lead us, that this displeased Samuel. Remember, Samuel's job was judge to lead God's people. God would lead Samuel. Samuel would do what God had him to do. And so he's in there and he's blown away. He can't believe that they would reject God and they wanted an earthly king, that they would walk away from God who was present and personal, who provided for them, who was there for them, who was their king to fight for them. Samuel couldn't understand why in the world would you shove God away for an earthly king like the other nations around them. And so it displeased Samuel. And so what does Samuel do? He prays, which is a great reminder that when we enter into moments like this, that create tension within us, that create some anger within us, that our go-to response should be, hey, God, I need to have a conversation with you. Hey, God, you and I need to talk because I know what I'm feeling inside and I just need to know what to do with it. Now, what we have to prepare for is, and I've found this true for my life, and Samuel, it's true for him. Usually when I go and I'm like, hey, God, this is what I'm dealing with, and this is what I think you should do. Have you ever told God what you think he should do? I have. Usually God's response is vastly different than I think his response should be. And this is going to happen for Samuel. Samuel is not going to even remotely anticipate God's response. And God said to him, listen. Now that word listen literally means to obey. To do what they're asking you to do. So it's a both end. Hey Samuel, you got to listen to what they're going to request, and you're going to follow their request. Hey Samuel, you need to listen. It's going to sound absurd. You're not going to understand it. It's displeasing to you. And I'm asking you to actually follow what they're asking of you. Could you imagine Samuel? He spent his lifetime following God, obeying God. And now God's like, no, you need to obey them. God says, listen, obey to all that the people are saying to you. And Samuel, don't look above the waterline to your age and what your sons are doing. Look below the waterline. And this is the below the waterline moment. Because it's not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me. They don't want me as king, Samuel. And I'm going to ask you to follow what they are going to ask of you. But Samuel, no. This has been happening for a long time. And God takes Samuel back through history. And that's why it's amazing that we have these stories. It's why it's important for us to understand the overarching storyline of the Bible, how patient God truly is. And God takes Samuel back through history. He says, hey, Samuel, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt. Hey, Samuel, you know the story. I heard their cries in captivity. I heard their cries crying out in pain, in anguish, and I delivered them. And right when I brought them out, Samuel, what did they say? They wanted to go back. What did they do? What I provided for them wasn't good enough, so they wanted to go back. Hey, Samuel, I understand what's going on here. And Samuel, you got to remember. You got to remember. Just look back. This is nothing new. Forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now, listen. Obey. Obey them. But, and this is important, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. Hey, Samuel, give them what they want, but be very clear. And God's always been very clear. We got to understand that. I mean, this is why this book, this collection of stories and teachings and poems and insights, so clear on how we are to follow, how we are to obey God, how we are to live with God. God's always been clear. And listen how clear God is. Through Samuel, to his people. He's like, okay, I'll give you what you want. You can have what you want. But you got to know what's going to happen. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. This is what a king's going to do. He will take your sons, make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they'll run in front of his chariots. Hey, your sons are the king's going to bring them right into their army, and they're going to run in front of the king to protect the king, to die for the king. Some he will reassign to commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and so others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. And oh, by the way, not just your sons. The king will come after your daughters, and he'll take your daughters. Not ask, not request, not encourage. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them over to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He'll take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. Hey, you got to know that kings do what kings are going to do. I mean, God couldn't be any clearer to the path that they were wanting to walk down. And after Samuel got done, being absolutely as clear as he could be with the words God had given him. God goes on through Samuel and says, when that day comes, and that day is going to come, you will, not maybe, not might, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen. It's going to happen. God's like, I'm just going to tell you. This is the end of the storyline. This is where the storyline goes. This is where the pathway leads. One day, it will come. You will beg me for relief. But remember, you chose this path. And God says, I will not answer you in that day. You see, we feel like, can you feel that moment? God's like, hey, that's going to be on your own. That's on your shoulders. I'm giving you the option. But you see, God does that with us to this day. God offers us the choice. He offers you the choice. But I, own the consequences. Do you realize that? God does that with us to this day. God has given us how to have healthy, thriving relationships. But he goes, you're going to choose. Are you going to live within my will, my pathway, my guardrails for healthy, thriving relationships? Or are you going to choose your own path? God says, hey, this is how to have healthy financial decision-making steps. Are you going to honor God with your finances? God's like, hey, but it's your choice. This is what I've designed for you. But you have to own your consequences to your decision-making. God says, hey, this is what the church is really about. I mean, he's so clear about what the church is for, his purpose, his vision, his mission. He's like, but ultimately, you get to choose. But you have to own your own decisions. God's like, it's up to you what pathway you take. But no, if you choose an earthly king, this is what's going to happen. Because kings do what kings do. So what was the people's decisions after God was so clear with what the pathway they wanted to choose was going to look like? We're told the people refused to listen to Samuel, which ultimately meant God. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like, and this is the real issue, we'll be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. And God was like, but that was my promise for you. My covenant relationship was to go before you, to fight your battles, to be your leader, your God. And God answers. Listen, obey what they want to do, and give them a king. Give them a king. You see, when we think about Advent, it's a story, not just for December and Christmas time. It's a story that spans the pages of this ancient text, a storyline that started with brokenness in the garden and the length that God will go to be with his people. You see, when we think about Advent, it really is a story about us rejecting God and what God will do to restore you and me to him. When we think about Advent, it's a story of a fractured relationship. Not because of anything God has done, because God has kept his covenant relationship, his commitment, his bond. It's what we have done. And it's God saying, I will bring you back. I will redeem you. When we think about Advent, It really is about how we, you and me, disobey God, but his grace covers us. But also don't miss in that. Even though God's grace covers us, God says to you, he says to me, you still own your consequences. My grace will cover you, but there's still consequences to actions. And here's the thing, we all know that's true, don't we? What Samuel didn't realize until that moment was that he was going to be the last judge. The last judge. And he was going to be the one to usher into God's chosen people, a king. Not because God wanted them to have a king, because God fully understood that kings do what kings do. But more than that, God wanted to be their king, to be their leader, to be their provider, to be their protector. And God understood what an earthly king was going to do. So God gave them what they wanted. And probably for Samuel, he thought it was going to be a bad ending. You see, God is a God that restores. God is a God that redeems. God is a God that will go at great length in patience to be with, to dwell, to have a relationship with you, with me. And what God fully understood, that what they asked for isn't what they really needed. And so he was going to give them a king beyond any earthly king, a king like this world had never seen before, that his kingdom was going to come to this earth. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later, a guy comes running out of the wilderness. An eccentric guy, weird guy named John the Baptist. And he started to say something over and over and over again that no one quite understood. He said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. And when John the Baptist got arrested, this guy from a small town of outcasts named Jesus started to tell people, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. And what no one realized was how near the king truly was. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thankful for your promises. I'm thankful for your presence. I'm thankful for your peace. Thankful for your patience. And God, that's why we praise you as our Lord, as our provider, as our protector. And as we make our way through this Advent season, may we not miss the lengths you have gone to redeem, to restore, to give us your grace because of your love. In your name I pray. Amen.